Thanks everyone for coming. Good to see you on this Tuesday afternoon. Okay, so Yurika and I are going to be talking about, showing you the how-to guides we've written on remote Braille teaching and the learning environment. So in case anyone's new, I'm Stephanie Herlich, and I'm the Assistant Center Coordinator at California School for the Blind. I'm a teacher that's visually impaired and orientation and mobility specialist. And Yurika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Yurika, and I am the Assistive Technology Coordinator at California School for the Blind. And I am a vision rehab therapist and O&M specialist as well. And I know this session says remote Braille teaching and learning environment, and this heavily includes Zoom and as well as incorporates JAWS and VoiceOver. So it's pretty comprehensive. Stephanie and I have been working on this project since August. So we have compiled a ton of how-to guides and written sheets so you guys can follow step by step, as well as towards the end, we do have some case studies. So that might, you might think about your student, which one they fall under. And then of course, after our presentation, it'll be open to roundtable discussion.
So when we started this, you know, I do know everyone's getting pretty familiar with Zoom right now, but we did break this down into kind of thinking about students, beginner students, intermediate, and then advanced students. So just kind of recognizing that all of our students' environments look very different. And Yurika, can you go to the best practices document? We will share the PowerPoints with you, and within the there's links to everything. So don't worry about having to write stuff down. We will make sure you have access to these files. But basically, we're thinking about the students and how everyone's in a different environment, and how some students may have a really great setup in their bedroom, sitting at their desk. Some students are at the dining room table. I've heard of students sitting on the floor at the coffee table with a bunch of things going on in the background. Some of our students have a lot of adult supervision and help, and some of our students have little to none. So we wanted to think about how we can reach these students most easily and successfully for them. So we talk about this. We're showing you right now a best practices document, and pretty much everything is linked from there. So we wrote down the materials needed, and we're envisioning students and a Braille lesson, maybe using a Braille display. For the beginner students, just paper Braille and even a Perkins Braille writer. Intermediate students, likely a Braille display, and advanced students using a computer and Braille display. So in our case studies, we'll show you those 3 different levels, but the materials are talking about what all students may or may not need. So again, it's computer, a secondary device for our beginner students so that you as the teacher can see what their hands are doing. Obviously an internet connection. If you're using a secondary device, we highly recommend getting an adjustable stand to hold that secondary device, because that is going to be angled onto the work surface so that you can see what the student is doing. Braille display, as I mentioned, for intermediate and advanced students, a Braille writer for our beginner students, and then a non-slip reading pad if you're doing any paper Braille reading. So we talk a little bit in here about the fundamentals and certain specific things to examine in order to create the most efficient learning environment. So the first one we're going to talk about is the student device selection and desk setup. So if your students are learning Braille, beginner Braille readers, it's still, even in this remote environment, it's so important that we be able to see their hand movements. And Yurika, can you go down a little bit to the pictures? Yeah, a little bit lower. So these pictures are included in the document, And I want to say I got these off of the Teachers of the Blind and Visually Impaired O&M Facebook group. Someone had posted these, or Stacy Garner posted these and gave me permission to share them out. So this was her desk setup. And I just, when I saw that, it all kind of clicked in for me. Just so here, this would be a lesson with a beginning Braille reader. And I even liked that she had the abacus there. So she had, you can see that the secondary device, which is the phone, how it's angled towards the computer or the Braille writer. And so when you and your student have a Zoom meeting going, you actually have 3 windows open. Your student has 2 Zoom windows, and then as the teacher, you have 1. And we're going to talk about how to mute that secondary device so you don't get the audio feedback. If you've had that experience, it's not very pleasant. So I think that the picture's worth 1,000 words, and just how it's showing that setup. What else do I want to say about this? So the computer itself for an intermediate student would be running JAWS and Zoom, and we're going to show you how-to guides to get that set up most successfully. And I'm going to go down to Zoom management, because getting set up, your Zoom meeting set up as the teacher, getting that set up is really essential to having everything work smoothly. So in the how-to guide, and Yurika, can you go ahead and click on the how to Zoom for teachers? And go ahead and, yeah, open that up. Okay, so I'm going to first go down to the bottom of it, the bottom of the document, where we have the recommended Zoom settings. And what I did is I just went through Zoom, and these are all of the essential ones for you to think about. And this is found in, you go to zoom.us in the browser, you log in, and then you go into the settings menu. And there are a lot of settings, but these are the most important ones. So for example, you want to turn off the waiting room so your student can get right in. You can turn off require a password when scheduling meetings so that you don't have to deal with the passwords. You can also, if you are required to have a password, you can embed it in the invite link. The turn host and participants video on so you don't have issues with the video. And then you want to allow screen sharing by all participants. Sometimes, even I think in our meetings, you have to request screen sharing. So if you can set that up ahead of time, that's great. Select host only for who can start sharing when someone else is sharing, because you don't want students to override what you might be sharing on your screen. There is an option to allow for remote control, and we played around with this a little bit. It has its positive and negatives, and maybe after we're done, people can share if they've given it a try. I think it can be good in some situations, but it's not as good as Team Viewer. Is that right, Yurika? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the option to allow remote support enables more control features of remote computers. So that's, again, kind of getting that remote support, but Team Viewer is more likely the way to go on that. So if you scroll back up to the top for me, Yurika, so this is setting up, hold on, I'm gonna go back real quick to, Yurika, can you toggle back to the best practices document? Yeah, so where it goes down, where you go down, no, the best practices one, our main document. Yeah, and then I'm gonna talk, so first you wanna set everything up. And then for creating and accessing meetings, in here we just talk about there's so many ways for students to be able to access a Zoom meeting. And I know that some students are feeling overwhelmed or just frankly not successful in getting into their meetings. So Yurika and I kind of broke it down into beginner method for accessing a meeting and then an intermediate advanced method. if you have a student that's new at this, we call them a beginner, and the easiest way to do it would be to send a weekly email and a text, because this beginning student is the one that's going to be using 2 devices. If you send that weekly email, they'll be able to find it, and the email would be for the computer, which is the primary device. You click the link on the email and they're in. For the secondary device, you would right before text the link to the meeting, because that's actually even easier. Students with VoiceOver can just swipe and click the link and they're into the Zoom. And we do have a how-to guide on how to do that. For the more intermediate and advanced students, one of the best ways is to create the Zoom links from your Google Calendar. And that's what you're doing as the teacher. And the student can then add those into their Google Calendar. Once you have the Google Calendar, you can click the links straight from there. And that's actually what I do. Otherwise, because I started off with this and I was losing Zoom links and trying to go into my email and figure out who sent them, and then I couldn't find them and I was late to a meeting. So you kind of get that anxiety that students feel. So I think talking to students about the best way for them to manage these links is really important. From the teacher side, we do advise setting up a recurring link for each student. So we have personal links for our individual Zoom accounts, but we actually don't recommend using those, because that's how one student may accidentally enter the meeting of another student. So by setting up those recurring links, you won't have that problem. And now I'm going to pass it over to Yurika, and she's going to talk about it from the student perspective. So what I was discussing was how you as the teacher could set it up, and now what is the easiest way for our students to access?
Okay, so like Stephanie had mentioned, there's so many ways to join and log into Zoom meetings. So we kind of focused on 3 or 4 of them. So there's logging onto a Zoom meeting via meeting code. And I'm just going to click each one of these links because we wrote these how-to guides on each one of them. But I shared this document last week for TBIs. So if your student doesn't know how to, navigate email already, then they can actually just go to zoom.us/ join, yeah, and then type in the meeting ID and join that way. So here are step-by-step in regards to how to log in if this is their first time logging in, so they don't have a saved user login. And then the second one is if they have if they're already logged into Zoom and have it saved, have their username saved. So that is that sheet. And then we also, so I think most commonly students are logging into the Zoom meeting via email. And so this document will guide you through how to log in, how to sign in to email, and then how to navigate your email to get to the Zoom meeting, and then how to open it from there. So even if your student doesn't have email skills, this is pretty straightforward, 7-8 steps in order to launch the Zoom meeting. These instructions are written using JAWS 2020, which is the newest version, not the newest version. 2021 is the newest version, right? That's out right now, but 2020 will work. And also I'm using the Chrome browser because I tried it on Firefox, and depending on the version of Firefox you have, some of it doesn't work. So if your student has Chrome on their computer, that's the browser that we would recommend and how this sheet was written. So that's instruction on how to log in via Zoom email link. And then also here, Google Calendar with JAWS. This is not necessarily a step-by-step on like how to log in via the calendar. However, this does just talk about how to access Google Calendar with JAWS. The other thing we created and we thought would be really useful is this Zoom meeting link template. And I wanted to just go over this. So your student has multiple Zoom meetings that they have to be in every single day. And so we created this template, and feel free to, you know, make a copy of this template and then enter in the Zoom link information. So for example, you would write your student's name, and then their class would be math. They have days of the week. They have it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. and then you would paste this Zoom link. So these Zoom links, they won't change, right? So it's the same it's usually the same for the whole semester or quarter. And so from here, what the student can do is, are you going to talk about this part, Stephanie?
Sure. Yeah, so then we talk about, so with this Zoom link template, and the whole idea is how can the students be as independent as possible, because we know that they don't have parents, many of them don't have parents that can sit with them and figure this out. So we have a document that explains to students how to save this to the desktop. And really, if you have a beginner student that isn't all that familiar with JAWS, the parent can save it one time to the desktop, and the how-to document is written really simply. So you could send the how-to document to the family, save that template onto the desktop, and then teach your student, because it's actually pretty easy for the student with very beginning JAWS skills to get to that document and then click the link and they're in and they're good to go. Once they're in, you know, can interact with them as the teacher. So it's kind of like, what is the easiest way for you to get that initial Zoom connection going? So we tried to make that a really simple document that you can share with families.
Yeah, and so once the parent or you can instruct the student how to do this, what happens is they makes a shortcut onto their desktop. So here, for example, you can see my desktop, it says Zoom Link Management Template. So if I were to open that, it'll open up the document without me having to like log in or navigate through Drive in order to find this document, and then I can access all of my Zoom links from there. So that's just a very simple way to get all of your Zoom links onto one shortcut onto your desktop.
Okay, let's see.
Shared note in iOS.
Yes. So actually last week, I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to join us. We had, as part of White Cane Day, Apple did a session with teachers, and they talked about a shared note in, if you're using iOS, if you're using a phone or a iPad as your secondary camera. I thought this was a great idea. So we have a document that tells you how to share the note, but basically you as the teacher create a new note. You have to make sure to create that note in iCloud. Under iCloud, you share, and you can add in, similar to the template, you could add in all of the students' Zoom links, share that note, and then when the student is ready to log in on their secondary device, they just go to the shared note and tap the Zoom link and they're in. So that would be an alternative to sending them a text prior to each class.
And the other option too is if your student doesn't have a laptop, but they do have an iPad and their parent has an iPhone, the shared note can be accessed on both devices, so they can be working on the iPad with you via this shared note, logged onto the same meeting with their iPhone with this shared note, and then you still have that two devices.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this part's me. So, you know, one thing is, if your student is using a computer with JAWS and or a screen reader, it is really important when they're sharing the screen that they share the computer audio sound. And here are instructions on how to share the audio sound. If they don't share the computer audio, then you will not hear the screen reader come through the computer. So that it's very simple 5 steps on how to share, and then how to check mark the box that says share computer sound. So that is important. And then here for their secondary, so they would log into their computer with the screen reader, share sound, and then on their secondary device, whether that's like an iPhone, probably ideally because it's small, then it can be mounted or propped up somewhere, they would join the meeting via text message. So you as the teacher would send them to text message immediately prior to the meeting, because sometimes if they get a lot of text, then it's going to be hard for them to navigate to the correct text message. But here are instructions on how to join without audio. And the reason why we put this without audio first is when you're logged onto the same Zoom meeting on 2 devices, you get the echo and the feedback. And even though you turn down the volume, you still get the feedback and the audio distortion. So as long as you join without audio, then you don't have that problem. Then it's just reflecting back the camera, which is what you would need as the TVI. But if your student does need to connect with audio, then the second section is how to connect with audio on iOS device.
And I'll just say, we're assuming on the iOS device that they've already downloaded the Zoom app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Okay, I already went through screen share with audio. Navigating JAWS with Zoom. So I covered a lot of this last week for Zoom with TVIs, but I just thought I would share this resource as well. But these are basically the keyboard commands that you would need in order to navigate the Zoom window. So here, it's just meeting setup, commands to use during the meeting, and then the list of complete Windows commands for the Zoom meeting. So we put that in there as well. And then here are just some other related documents if your student needs additional skills.
And that how to save a document to the desktop was down there at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're just going to go to the best practices.
Back to the PowerPoint?
Yes. And go down to the next one. So I think the chat might be growing. So we'll just kind of go through these and then keep putting your thoughts in the chat, and we'll make sure to save time to talk about it. But just to pull it all together, we mentioned that we broke this down into beginner, intermediate, and advanced users. And one thing that Yurika and I found out when we were doing this, we realized that for that intermediate student, that's the one that's frankly the most complicated. So I'm going to talk to you about the beginner and advanced. I'm going to leave the complicated stuff to Yurika. So for the beginner student, we're thinking this is a Braille lesson and the student is using a Braille writer. So let's think of a student who's 7 years old, has no light perception, 45-minute daily lessons with the TVI because they're a beginning Braille reader, but minimal parental help, and the student would have a Braille writer. So for this student, we felt like the best practice would be to text that Zoom link to the student's phone right before the lesson. So as we said, you're not having to search for that link. It's just right there. They click on the link and they are in. And then in this case, really only one device is needed, and that device is the one that's going to be focused down on the student. So the parent would set up the phone that they've just logged in on using a stand that's pointing towards the Braille writer or the hard copy Braille. Now, if you have the advantage of using a computer, then you as the teacher can see the student's face, which is probably nice. You're getting their expressions and you kind of know what they're thinking if they're frustrated. But in reality, you really only need that one device that is pointing down onto the student's hand.
Mm-hmm. And then just for reference, this picture, just take out the computer side and just look at the right side of it. So that's what you would be seeing. Okay, so as Stephanie mentioned, your intermediate user who has some computer skills and has some different kinds of technology may be the most difficult or complicated. And the reason why is because, what did I say to you, Stephanie? that's where they're growing the most, right? So there's so many different technologies or skill levels and devices. So I think maybe many of your students will fall under this category. So the student we thought of was maybe like 10 years old, completely blind, no light perception, has about 45-minute lessons with the TVI 2 times a week. They have parental assistance maybe once a week, or very minimal parental assistance, and they have some JAWS and voiceover basics. So not super proficient, but they can follow instructions and can follow along, have basic. So the best practices for this student would be to send them the Zoom management template. So we shared this document earlier. It's the one document where you, as the teacher, puts all of the students' schedule and Zoom link into that document, and then have that parent saved onto the parent, have the parent save it onto the desktop if the student cannot do it independently. And basically you're going to just instruct the student how to access that. So they would just go to the desktop, press enter, or navigate to the that bookmark, press enter, and then navigate to the Zoom link per assigned session or whatever class that they need to be in. So this student would be logged onto the Zoom via the computer, ideally sharing their screen with you. And then you would also text the Zoom link to the student's phone. And then this is where the student would log into the Zoom meeting with their phone without audio. So then that's where you get the two devices. You can either have them position it over the keyboard for, you know, if you're doing keyboarding or computer skills, or if you're doing an assessment, you can have it set up 2 feet away to the left or to the right, or behind, you know, whatever position that you need to be able to see them. And or it would be positioned over the Braille display too. So if you're doing a lesson, you know, making sure that they are learning their Braille contractions, making sure that they are navigating their Braille display correctly, all of that can be seen via the secondary device.
Okay, so for the advanced student, this would be, let's say they're doing a Google Classroom assignment and the student is using their PC with a Braille display. So this student is 14 years old, again, no light perception, maybe only 45 minutes once a week with their TVI. They're pretty advanced, they know Braille, they're familiar with JAWS and voiceover, and in this case, there's no parent availability. So this is kind of where we want our students to get to. We want them to be able to access the links for, I think that's supposed to say for Zoom, from the computer, and ideally from Google Calendar or an email link. Personally, I think the Google Calendar keeps things more organized, especially if you're someone like me that doesn't delete my emails and then you end up with thousands of emails to try to search through. And then the student would set up Zoom for screen share, and we have the document on how to do that. So it kind of helps put it in perspective and to think about your students and what is best for them, what kind of support they have. We do want to show you 2 more things that we came up with in terms of being able to see what your student is doing. Yurika, can you go to the next screen? So these are basically alternative options for the secondary device. Yurika, do you want to talk about the IPEVO and then I'll talk about the other one?
Yeah. So we had just actually at CSB purchased a bunch of these mirror cams through IPEVO. They're quite cheap. It's like a 6-pack for $40. And as you can see from this picture, it's basically just like a little mirror thing that the student clips onto their laptop, and then it works as a, so then you can see either their fingers or you can see what they're writing. And although it does, you know, I would say that the downside to this, it does require a software installation, and how accessible or easy that software is to navigate, we haven't been able to evaluate yet because we haven't received it. But if you want to read more about it, the link is right here. And like I said, it's, you know, it's very cheap. And if I had a whole bunch of students, I would just probably just dish out $40 and send one to each one of my students, because I think it's so important to be able to see your students' fingers when they're either learning keyboarding and or Braille, and especially in this distance model.
So then I just wanted to share this, and it has its positive and negative sides, but I saw this on Facebook, a Facebook posting. But basically, it's what you see in the picture is someone took a pencil and you tape the pencil to the back of your laptop or your computer, right where the camera is. And then you take a CD with the mirror side down and you drop it over the pencil. And there's actually also, there's a quarter taped to the back of the CD for weight. And it acts a little bit like a camera. So I just slipped this on my computer and now you see my keyboard. So the one thing, I thought it was pretty slick and I got all excited about it until Yurika told me that it's backwards from her view. And I didn't know that because in my Zoom view, the picture of my own hands, it's not backwards. And we tried turning off the mirror, the settings, and that didn't fix it. So maybe someone has an idea of how to fix that, because it really was pretty cool. And then the other thing is I took a Braille paper, and depending on your lighting, you can't really see the Braille, but at least if you have that new Braille student, you can see where their hands are and what their hand movement is looking like. So, you know, it's kind of, in fact, the posting on Facebook was called MacGyver, referred to, you know, using a MacGyver method. And I thought it was pretty cool. So I wanted to share that with all of you.
There is a way to flip your camera into the video settings. You just check the mirror my video.
We already tried that.
We tried it. It didn't work.
It didn't?
So
Sure.
no, because so you're backwards, right? I'm backwards to you right now, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go to my video settings.
That's
and
weird.
I turn off my mirror.
Oh, does it flip upside down?
No, so I just turned off my mirror, but it didn't, it made it reverse to my view, but it doesn't change your view.
Oh, dude, never mind. I'll shut up.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a bummer. I was so excited, and then now I wasn't quite as excited, but I still wanted to share it, hoping maybe someone has an idea of how that could
There
work.
has to be a way for that. What if you set up, this would be crazy, like another CD? Could you like mirror the mirror? Would that be insane to do that? But
You know what?
Yes, Cindy.
You know what?
now I'm trying it.
That's probably what this this mirror cam iPivo does. It probably has two mirrors, so it reflects it this way, then it reflects it that way, so then it does show up properly. But Zoom, it's because of the way Zoom is. So Stephanie was like, oh, she sent me a picture, and I was like, oh, it's perfect. And then we actually tried it on Zoom, and I was like, it's backwards. Which, you know, I mean, it is, the CD is like a free option. You can MacGyver and make one, kind of play with it. It's, you know, it's not going to cost you anything. And then you as a TV, I just have to know that you have to like flip it in your brain. It's kind of like what is that Braille? What's that Braille device where you have to
stylus?
Stylus.
Think
like
backwards.
Yeah, where you have to learn it backwards. So it's kind of like that. So like learning typing or the keyboarding backwards. Anyways, I think
They say reverse, not backwards, because I think backwards is the taboo word.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's all for our end, right?
Yeah. Yes. So questions, or maybe someone's monitoring the chat.
I've been playing with the chat. Hey, it's working for me. Do you guys see it backwards, or do you see it correct?
Yes, it is, Adrian.
Backwards, right?
Backwards. Yeah. So that's the thing. To me, it looks fine.
Backwards.
I need you to mirror the mirror. How can you do that? Can you set up another one, like I don't know how you would do that, right above?
I don't know.
That is the neatest thing. There's got to be a way to fix that.
Yeah, I thought it was so cool. And just so you know, that you have to put a quarter on the, if you guys are going to try it, you put a quarter on the CD, and then when you flip it onto the pencil, you actually turn the CD a little bit to get to the right angle, because the quarter acts as a weight.
Somebody's saying something about it in the chat there.
I think if you change the mirror effect before joining a meeting, then it'll fix, but you may not be able to switch back and forth during the meeting. We actually tried, we didn't actually try logging off, but when you it's kind of like the virtual backgrounds, when you select it, it implements it immediately. So we didn't actually try logging off the meeting. We can try that, but I don't
think it's going to work, because I saw when I changed the mirror on mine, I see a difference, but you don't. So it's almost like that mirror effect is for you as the viewer. It's not for the people you are reaching out to. Does that make sense?
I have a question. I noticed that you were talking about using the JAWS screen reader with Zoom. And I was wondering if you have also used any of the others like NVDA, or if there is a preference for JAWS.
Most educational school systems use JAWS. That's why we write it for JAWS. Although we do have a lot of students who use NVDA, and they like NVDA. So yes, you can use NVDA with JAWS, but we don't necessarily have documented paper handouts on that.
And I see Rebecca had a question about a good way to make Braille more visible on camera. That's a really good question. And if you need more light, so I recommend like a gooseneck light, or if you yet another phone, but you need a flashlight. You need something to shine onto the Braille, and then it becomes very visible. So that being said, you're needing the parental help to get that set up. And that's why in the picture that we showed on the PowerPoint, you could see there was extra lighting, because that really is the only way you're going to be able to visually see Braille through Zoom, is you've got to add that extra light. I'm just looking at the chat. Yurika, have you been scanning it?
I mean, it looks like Adrian and other people have answered most of the questions.
Anyone else have other questions?
You guys are all pros now?
When did you try the camera and the Braille with the flashlight? Or the light, did you have to do it at an angle? If your light's directly above, do you get enough of a shadow, or?
I think it's better at an angle.
I wonder if you used I wonder if they can use like a flashlight.
Well, I did it with a phone, which is a lot like a flashlight. So it's possible, you might have to play around with it, but it's possible you might be able to just lay the flashlight on the table and get the right angle. But it's just something that, yeah, I think ours was more from above. Yeah, you have to play around what angle you need. And frankly, it also depends on just the lighting you have in the room where the student is working.
It's a good time for all those tagger embossers.
Yeah.
For those of you using transcribing Mariners, I don't think they advertise it, but if you ask them, they will transcribe their inner line any Braille they send out to your district.
Wow.
So I'm going to put the best practices document that has all of the links to everything that we shared in the chat here. So feel free to save that link. And this recording will be available probably next week on our CSB YouTube channel, as well as this information.
All right, well, I think unless anyone has any other questions, our presentation part is done. And thank you so much for joining us. Next week, Adrian, does somebody know what next week's Tuesday Tea topic is?
Yeah, next week is free mental health resources.
Oh,
so
I should know that.
we believe it's very relevant for our TVIs to really kind of put ourselves into place and thinking about our kids and their full, whole child education here. Thinking about where they're at, but it's also please reach out to your school psychologists and people that are other people working with your kids and invite them too. And we believe that it's relevant across the board beyond our vision specialists as well. If anybody would like to share on today's topic too, something you're using or something that you have found effective or something that you're struggling with, please do that too.
Hi, yes, I have a quick question.
Yes, Miguel.
Hi, yes, so we have a student, I know you guys mentioned earlier about as far as the Zoom, just sending the link, a minute before, just a little bit before they start the lesson. Is there a way to create a folder in their Google email or Google Classroom so they can store their reoccurring Zoom meetings?
This is Annalisa in the distance. I actually did create a separate folder for Braille or whatever, and I would actually put a link in there that you can use. Sorry, my phone went off. They can use that link as a repeat meeting.
Yeah. So how do you create the folder in Google Classroom or in their Google? Because we're trying to do it over the phone with the student, and we're having trouble explaining how to do it.
How to create a Google folder and Drive?
Yeah, so a folder to store the reoccurring Zoom meetings.
Is it in Drive or Classroom? Because they're different. They're different.
I believe it's in Classroom.
I know a lot of our teachers are just putting one document, like the top document, that has all those links for their different Zoom meetings. It's not in a separate folder, but then they have a folder for the like math class or English or whatever, and then the student. So in the main top level, they have that document, and then they go into another folder for their class. I seem like that's the way they're doing it.
So I think it's their email, because my student would have to scroll through all his emails. I think that's what it was. I'm trying to remember what the TVI was sharing with me. But in their .org, their Google, their .org accounts.
So you can create a folder within, instead of the inbox, you create a folder that and I just did this with a student today, that only takes, all of my emails to him will go in there, and all of his classroom teachers' emails will go in there, and all the rest are still in the inbox, but he was just lost trying to find them.
Yeah,
so then he can go in there, and it's just my emails and just his teachers' emails.
So I think it's really difficult if you keep sending multiple links and different links. If the link is static, meaning it doesn't change week to week, probably the easiest way, instead of creating like a folder into Classroom or a folder into Drive, which they still have to open, the browser, go to Drive, navigate Drive to find the folder to open that, is to follow what Stephanie and I suggested about using that template. So if you put all the links in that template and put it onto their desktop, then all they have to do is Windows D to desktop, and then Z for Zoom meeting or whatever you named it, and then press enter, and then it'll pull up that document with all of the links in it. That's the easiest way that we found to manage all of the Zoom meetings that the students have to attend.
And that way they are in the Zoom as fast as possible, and then you can work with them on how to get to Classroom and Drive and all the other things that they still need to learn. But it's so hard for them to get there. You want the quickest path possible to get that Zoom meeting going.
Exactly, yeah, because we missed several with one of our students. And
so I'll put in the chat, this is the direct link to the Zoom meeting template that you can make a copy of. And then, if you input all of the links in there, and then either send that document to the parent or the student, and then have them save it onto the desktop.
This works with the Chromebook as well? Can we put it on the Chromebook as well? On the desktop?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a Google Doc. It's a Google Doc. So it's basically like making a bookmark. It's making a shortcut onto the desktop.
Okay.
The
Great.
directions might be a little bit different because those are for a PC, not a Chromebook.
Okay. But that helps. So thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing I did just as a backup plan this week, because I was frustrated with all that process, you know, I have several students and they're kind of all over the board, and some are independent, some aren't, some forget, some have memorized the meeting IDs and passcodes, some don't know how to do links. So I got kind of have the whole thing. So what I did is I did a keychain, and the key, well, a key ring, I guess you would call it. I call it a keychain, but it's a key ring. And I did a card in Braille and then interlined that. And each card, it'll say, like my classroom is Cindy Zoom, then it has the meeting ID and passcode. And interestingly enough, as I had to do a lot of explaining with my particular students why the link wasn't on there. Because I said, no, you know, you got to press on it. You can't press on the paper. So eventually they found that funny, but we had to talk about that for a long time. But the parents were particularly interested because then that's a backup plan for them, instead of having to find that document that, you know, I provided 150 times that is not on the desktop. It's a physical piece of paper and they're trying to type this in. So that's just a backup plan that arrived this week. And I'm hoping for those that are not really independent, that if they can get on zoom.us/join, that they can type that in from the little cards and hopefully get into the right meeting, you know, if they read the card. But anyway.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I hope.
Good luck. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Unless someone has a last minute shout out, question, comment.
Yay!
Good job, everybody. This is Annalisa in the distance. I just want to congratulate everybody for surviving. It is really difficult to do what we do. And thank you for CSB for sponsoring all of us to be open, and the virtual water cooler that we all hear about in school, and being open with suggestions. I just really appreciate it because it's not easy. It's hard.
Thank you, Annalisa. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Take care of yourselves.